What if I told you that stupidity isn't just a lack of intelligence, but something far darker, something deeply insidious? A force capable of transforming brilliant minds into instruments of destruction. A force that has the potential to unravel the very fabric of civilization. Imagine a world where the greatest threat to humanity isn't evil people doing evil things, but ordinary people who've simply stopped thinking. Imagine this: a renowned scientist, admired for years, with multiple degrees and accomplishments, suddenly starts spreading misinformation that could put millions of lives at risk. A compassionate teacher, someone we'd expect to guide the next generation with wisdom and care, begins endorsing harmful ideologies. A loving parent, trusted by their children, begins making decisions that place them in danger. These aren't malicious people, though. They aren't consciously doing evil. No, they're victims of something far more dangerous than we could ever have imagined, a force Dietrich Bonhoeffer called the power of stupidity. But here's the terrifying part: it's not happening to other people. It's happening to people just like you and me. This is not just a philosophical concept. This is a real, pressing issue affecting us today in ways we don't even fully understand yet. Stupidity isn't an obvious flaw that you can point out. It's subtle, it's pervasive, and it's dangerous. To truly understand how the power of stupidity works, let me take you back to the 1960s. A psychologist by the name of Stanley Milgram conducted a series of infamous obedience experiments at Yale University. He recruited ordinary volunteers to take part in what they believed was an experiment on memory and learning. Each volunteer was asked to administer electric shocks to another person whenever they made an error on a memory task. Now, keep in mind, the volunteer didn't actually administer the shocks, but they believed they did. The person on the other side of the wall screamed in agony each time they made a mistake. They begged the volunteer to stop. They cried out for help. The shocks were getting stronger with every wrong answer, but the authority figure in the room, a researcher in a lab coat, simply told them to continue. What would you do? Would you stop? Would you refuse to continue when you hear the screams of agony? Would you follow the instructions? Here's what happened. 65% of the participants continued to administer shocks, even when they believed they could be lethal. These weren't sadists or mentally ill people. They were regular folks, just like you and me. These were people who temporarily surrendered their ability to think for themselves in favor of following authority, even when they knew it was wrong. It's terrifying, right? And the truly unsettling part is this: we're all susceptible to this kind of surrender. When we stop thinking critically and independently, we lose our ability to differentiate right from wrong, and this, my friends, is precisely what Dietrich Bonhoeffer witnessed in Nazi Germany. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wasn't just another philosopher, sitting in an ivory tower, making abstract observations. Bonhoeffer was a man who lived through one of the darkest times in history, the rise of the Nazi regime. He was a Lutheran pastor, a theologian, and most importantly, a man who couldn't stand idly by while his country descended into madness. Bonhoeffer's life and death are intertwined with the central question: how does intelligent, educated, and otherwise rational people end up following disastrous ideologies? Born in 1906 to an intellectual family, Bonhoeffer had every reason to believe in the power of reason, education, and rational discourse. But as the Nazi Party rose to power, Bonhoeffer witnessed something that shattered his faith in human rationality. He saw that it wasn't just the uneducated masses who were swept up in Nazi propaganda. It was the educated elite, the professors, doctors, lawyers, and clergy members. These were the people who had once argued for truth and reason, yet they too had fallen victim to something much more dangerous than ignorance. They had become complicit in the destruction of their own humanity. Bonhoeffer's greatest observation, written from his prison cell in 1943, just before his execution, remains one of the most haunting warnings in modern history. He wrote, "Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protests nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears." This line, simple and terrifying, encapsulates the danger of stupidity. Stupidity isn't just ignorance, it's a refusal to see reality, to accept any facts that contradict what we already believe. What Bonhoeffer realized was that this kind of stupidity is immune to reason. It wasn't enough to shout, to protest, or even to fight back against the forces of evil. Stupidity, as Bonhoeffer saw, doesn't recognize its own flaws, and therefore, it can't be corrected, and that, right there, is why Bonhoeffer's theory remains so frightening and relevant today. We live in a time where stupidity is no longer just an individual flaw, it is a systemic problem. Bonhoeffer's concept of stupidity wasn't just about a lack of intelligence or education. He wasn't talking about people who don't know things, he was describing what we now call functional stupidity. This is not a lack of intellectual capacity, but a willful ignorance, a failure to critically engage with the world around us, even when we're perfectly capable of doing so. In his letters from prison, Bonhoeffer explained that when people are caught in this web of stupidity, they often become possessed by slogans and catchwords. These phrases take over their minds and prevent them from thinking independently. Today, this is more relevant than ever. We are constantly surrounded by slogans, headlines, and viral sound bites that tell us what to think, what to believe, and how to act. But these are not always based on truth. They are based on manipulation, on making us feel emotions without encouraging us to critically assess the situation. But here's the chilling thing, it's not just that people choose stupidity. Systems and structures actually push us toward it. The political, economic, and social systems in place today actively discourage deep thinking and instead reward emotional shortcuts. Take social media, for example. Algorithms on platforms like Facebook and Twitter thrive when people react emotionally rather than thoughtfully. A post that evokes anger, fear, or outrage will get far more attention than a post that offers nuance or complexity. This is a system designed to capitalize on our psychological vulnerabilities. Similarly, news outlets gain more clicks and views when they sensationalize information. Politicians win elections by relying on simple, catchy slogans that stir emotions, rather than engaging in deep discussions about the issues. We live in a world that's constantly pushing us toward intellectual surrender, making it easier to follow the crowd than to think critically for ourselves. Bonhoeffer saw this kind of intellectual surrender happening in Nazi Germany, and now, it's happening all around us, more subtly than we realize. So why does this happen? Why do smart, educated people surrender their intellectual independence so easily? Well, it's not just about being weak or being ignorant. Our brains are literally wired to take intellectual shortcuts when we're stressed or overwhelmed. The groundbreaking research by psychologist Leon Festinger on cognitive dissonance in the 1950s showed that when people are confronted with information that contradicts their beliefs, their brains often fight to reject it. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. It's easier to dismiss opposing views than to entertain the idea that we might be wrong, and in today's world, we're constantly overwhelmed. We're stressed out by work, financial concerns, and the rapid pace of information coming at us. Our mental bandwidth is stretched thin. This creates an environment where intellectual shortcuts feel like a survival mechanism. Instead of processing complex, contradictory information, it's easier to accept simplified narratives that match our worldview. But here's where it gets really dangerous. These shortcuts don't just affect us individually. They affect society as a whole. What Bonhoeffer saw in Nazi Germany was a society that had abandoned independent thought in favor of intellectual comfort. And that is exactly what we're witnessing today. We see it in the digital age, especially on social media, where algorithms create echo chambers. These are spaces where we only encounter information that confirms our existing beliefs, and opposing viewpoints are either hidden or ignored. The result? People become more entrenched in their beliefs, and the outside world feels increasingly alien. This is functional stupidity in action. It's not that people are ignorant or uneducated. It's that they're surrounded by systems designed to reinforce their ignorance. The more we engage with these systems, the harder it becomes to break free and think independently. In fact, studies show that false information spreads 6 times faster than true information on social media. The reason for this isn't because people are evil, it's because false information feels better. It's simpler, more emotionally satisfying, and it confirms what we already believe. So, how do we break free from this cycle? How do we resist the pull of intellectual surrender? Bonhoeffer believed the answer was costly grace, the willingness to think independently, even when it's painful, uncomfortable, and dangerous. But we need more than just personal responsibility. We need societal change. We need systems that reward critical thinking, rather than emotional reactions. We need to build a world where thinking for ourselves is a valued and respected activity. The question Bonhoeffer leaves us with isn't whether we're smart enough to avoid stupidity. It's whether we're committed enough to keep thinking when thinking becomes uncomfortable, inconvenient, or costly. Will you choose to stay curious, even when certainty is easier? The future of humanity doesn't depend on our intelligence alone. It depends on our willingness to think for ourselves, to fight against the pull of functional stupidity, and to seek truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The next time you feel yourself getting comfortable with certainty, take a moment. Ask yourself, what am I missing? And remember, every time you choose curiosity over certainty, evidence over emotion, and careful thinking over quick reactions, you are not just protecting your mind. You are defending the very possibility of human wisdom in an age of artificial stupidity.